The loom clicked in steady rhythm as Elena Martinez pulled the shuttle through the warp threads, creating another pattern that would go unnoticed by everyone who passed her small adobe workshop at the edge of Rawlins, Wyoming. She had been weaving since dawn, her fingers moving with practiced precision across the wooden frame her father had built before he died. And now the afternoon sun slanted through the single window, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the air. The blanket taking shape beneath her hands was a masterpiece of deep indigos and rich crimsons, patterns she had learned from her Apache grandmother mixed with Spanish designs her mother had taught her. But Elena knew with a certainty that sat heavy in her chest that this blanket would join the others stacked in the corner, beautiful and unwanted. Rawlins in the summer of 1878 was a rough town built around the railroad, full of men who cared more about whiskey and cards than handwoven textiles, and women who either could not afford her work or saw her mixed heritage as something suspicious. Elena had been weaving for 3 years since her mother passed, trying to make a living from the craft that had been passed down through generations of women in her family. But each month brought less money and more worry. She was 22 years old and exhausted from fighting against a world that seemed determined to ignore her. The bell above her door chimed, a sound so unexpected that Elena nearly dropped her shuttle. She turned on her stool to see a tall cowboy ducking through the doorway, his hat in his hands and dust coating his leather vest and worn denim pants. He had brown hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of winter sky, and when he straightened to his full height, he nearly touched the low beams of her ceiling. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice carrying a slight drawl that suggested Texas or maybe Oklahoma. "I hope I am not disturbing you." Elena set down her shuttle and stood, smoothing her simple cotton dress. "You are not disturbing me. Can I help you with something?" The cowboy stepped further into the workshop, his gaze moving across the walls where she had hung several of her completed blankets as displays. His expression shifted from polite interest to something else, something that looked almost like wonder. He moved to the nearest blanket, a piece she had woven last winter using natural dyes she had gathered herself, creating a pattern of running horses against a sunset sky. "These are remarkable," he said, reaching out but stopping just short of touching the fabric. "May I?" "Yes, of course." He ran his fingers across the weaving, feeling the texture and weight of it. Elena watched him, trying to understand what had brought a cowboy into her shop. Most men who wandered in were looking for directions, or asking if she knew where they could find a seamstress for basic repairs. "I have been riding through Wyoming for 2 months," he said, still examining the blanket. "Working cattle drives and seeing country I never saw before. I have been in fine houses in Cheyenne and stayed in hotels in Laramie, and I have never seen work like this." "You are kind to say so." Elena kept her voice neutral, waiting for him to make whatever request had actually brought him here. He turned to look at her, and his eyes held an earnestness that caught her off guard. "How much for this one?" Elena blinked. "I am sorry, this blanket. How much are you asking for it?" She named a price, expecting him to wince or make an excuse to leave. Instead, he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a leather wallet, counting out bills without hesitation. He laid the money on her work table and carefully took the blanket down from the wall. "That one there," he said, pointing to another blanket with a geometric pattern in earth tones. "How much?" Elena told him, her heart beginning to beat faster. He paid for that one too. Then he asked about the blanket she was currently working on, and the two folded in the corner, and the one draped over the chair by the window. Within 20 minutes, the cowboy had purchased every completed blanket in her workshop and placed an order for 3 more with specific color requests. I will need a few weeks, Elena heard herself saying, her mind struggling to process what was happening. I can only work so fast. That is fine, the cowboy said, still looking around the now much emptier workshop. I will be in the area for a while. My name is Robert Sullivan, by the way. Most people call me Rob. Elena Martinez. It is a pleasure to meet you, Miss Martinez. He held out his hand and she shook it, his palm warm and calloused from ranch work. Would it be possible for me to come back in a week to see how the new blankets are coming along? I want to make sure the colors are what I am hoping for. Yes, that would be fine. He gathered up the blankets he had purchased, stacking them carefully in his arms until she could barely see his face over the pile of fabric. At the door, he paused and looked back at her. I meant what I said. These are remarkable. Anyone who passes by your work without stopping is a fool. Then he was gone, the bell chiming again as the door swung shut. Elena stood in the sudden silence of her workshop, staring at the empty walls and the stack of money on her table. She picked up the bills and counted them 3 times, each count confirming that she had just made more money in one afternoon than she typically made in 6 months. Her hands were shaking. She sat down heavily on her stool, her mind spinning with questions. What did a cowboy want with so many blankets? Was this some kind of strange joke? But the money was real, solid in her hands, and when she looked up at her bare walls, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The week that followed was a blur of work. Elena woke before dawn and worked until her eyes burned from staring at the loom by lamplight. She mixed dyes, prepared thread, and wove patterns that poured out of her hands like water. She had always been skilled, but something about knowing that someone actually wanted her work, that someone saw value in what she created, made her fingers fly across the loom with renewed energy. On the 7th day, as the afternoon sun once again filled her workshop, the bell chimed. Robert Sullivan stepped inside, this time wearing a clean shirt and with his hair recently cut. He smiled when he saw her at the loom. Miss Martinez, I hope the week has treated you well. Elena stood, wiping her hands on her apron. It has been busy. I have 1 blanket finished and the other 2 are coming along. She showed him the completed blanket, a design of deep blues and silvers that mimicked the night sky. He examined it with the same careful attention he had shown before, and she found herself watching his face for his reaction. This is even better than I hoped, he said. You have a real gift. Thank you. May I ask you something? Of course. What are you doing with all these blankets? This is far more than one person could need. Robert set the blanket down and leaned against her work table, crossing his arms. That is a fair question. The truth is, I have family back in Texas. A big family. 3 brothers, 2 sisters, parents, various aunts and uncles. I have been working hard the past few years, saving money, and I wanted to send them something special. When I saw your work, I knew it was exactly what I had been looking for. So they are gifts, some of them. Others I plan to keep for myself. I have been living out of a bedroll for so long, I figure when I finally settle down somewhere, I want to have beautiful things around me. He paused, and something in his expression shifted. Would you mind if I asked you a question now? Go ahead. Why are you set up out here at the edge of town? With work this good, you should be in a Main Street shop where everyone can see it. Elena felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came whenever she had to explain her situation. The rent is cheaper here. And honestly, most people in Rawlins are not interested in hand-woven blankets. They can buy factory-made goods for less, even if the quality is not the same. That seems short-sighted of them. Perhaps, but it is the way things are. Robert was quiet for a moment, studying her with those winter sky eyes. You know, I have been thinking. I have some money saved up, and I have been considering what to do next. The cowboy life is hard on the body, and I am not getting any younger. I was thinking maybe it is time to invest in something more permanent. What kind of investment? I am not entirely sure yet, but I would be interested in talking with you about it if you would be willing. Maybe over dinner. Elena felt her pulse quicken. Dinner? There is a decent restaurant on Main Street, the Copper Kettle. Do you know it? She knew it. She had never been inside because she could not afford it, but she knew it by reputation. I know of it. Would you join me tomorrow evening? We could talk about business, and I would like to hear more about your weaving. How you learned, where the patterns come from. I find it fascinating. Elena hesitated. She had not had dinner with a man since before her mother died. The few men in Rawlins who had shown interest in her had been looking for something temporary and physical, and she had no patience for that. But Robert seemed different. He looked at her work with respect, spoke to her like an equal, and there was something genuine in his expression that made her want to trust him. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow evening." His smile was bright and warm. "Excellent. I will call for you at 6 if that suits you." "That suits me fine." After he left, having paid for the completed blanket and promising to return the next day, Elena realized she was smiling. She could not remember the last time she had smiled without forcing it. That night, she pulled out the one nice dress she owned, a deep green cotton that had been her mother's, and checked it for any needed repairs. Her hands were still steady as she made small stitches by lamplight, but inside, her heart was racing with something that felt dangerously like excitement. The Copper Kettle was nicer than Elena had imagined. White tablecloths covered every table, and oil lamps with glass chimneys cast warm light across the room. Robert was waiting for her at a corner table, standing when she approached in a gesture of old-fashioned courtesy that made her feel suddenly shy. "You look beautiful," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." He laughed, a rich sound that made other diners glance their way. "I do my best, though I confess I am more comfortable in work clothes than this." He gestured at his pressed shirt and vest. They ordered food, and Elena tried not to think about the prices on the menu. Robert seemed unconcerned with cost, ordering wine and encouraging her to get whatever she wanted. When the food came, it was delicious, better than anything she had cooked for herself in months. "Tell me about your family," Robert said between bites of steak. "Where did you learn to weave?" Elena set down her fork, considering how much to share. "My father was Spanish, from a family that came to New Mexico generations ago. My mother was half Apache. She learned weaving from her mother, who learned from hers. The patterns I use come from both sides of my family." "That must make for interesting designs." "It does. Some people appreciate the mix, others see it as confusing or wrong." Robert frowned. "Wrong how? People like their categories neat. Spanish or Indian, but not both. And certainly not in Rawlins, where most folks are just trying to get by and do not have patience for anything that seems different." "Their loss," Robert said firmly. "Though I have to admit, I do not understand that kind of thinking. My family came from Ireland 2 generations back, but we mixed with Scottish and English along the way. Seems to me that most families are mixed if you go back far enough." Elena felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. You would think more people would see it that way. They talked through the rest of dinner, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Robert told her about growing up in Texas, learning to work cattle from his father, and eventually heading north to Wyoming to see new country and make his own way. Elena shared stories about her childhood, the months spent with her grandmother learning traditional Apache weaving techniques, and the struggle of trying to maintain her craft in a world that seemed to value speed and cheapness over quality and artistry. "The thing is," Robert said as they finished their meal, I have been thinking a lot about what you said, about how people in Rawlins are not interested in your blankets, but I do not think that is entirely true. What do you mean? I think they have not really seen them. You are tucked away at the edge of town where most people never go, and even if they did wander by, how would they know what you do? You do not have a sign, no advertisements. You are essentially invisible. Elena bristled slightly. I cannot afford a fancy sign or advertisements in the newspaper. I know. That is not what I am criticizing. I am just saying that maybe with the right setup, with the right location and presentation, people would respond differently. Perhaps, but that takes money I do not have. Robert leaned forward, his expression serious. What if you did have it? What if someone invested in your business, helped you get set up properly? Would you be interested in that? Are you offering? I might be. But I want to understand the full picture first. How much do you make in a typical month? How many blankets can you produce? What are your expenses? They spent the next hour talking through the details of Elena's business, and she was surprised by how good it felt to discuss it with someone who took her seriously. Robert asked intelligent questions and listened carefully to her answers. By the time they left the restaurant, Elena's head was spinning with possibilities. "Can I walk you home?" Robert asked as they stepped out into the warm evening air. "Yes, I would like that." They walked slowly through the quiet streets of Rawlins, their shoulders occasionally brushing. The town was settling down for the night, lamps glowing in windows and the distant sound of a piano drifting from one of the saloons. "I have enjoyed this evening very much," Robert said as they approached her workshop. "More than I have enjoyed anything in a long time." "I have too," Elena admitted. They stopped at her door and stood facing each other in the dim light from her window. Robert reached out and gently took her hand. "Would it be all right if I came by again, not just for blankets, but to see you?" Elena felt warmth spread through her chest. "I would like that." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "Good night, Elena." "Good night, Robert." She watched him walk away, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the shadows. Inside her workshop, she lit a lamp and sat at her loom, but she could not concentrate on weaving. Her mind kept returning to dinner, to the way Robert had looked at her, to the possibility that maybe, just maybe, things were about to change. Over the next 3 weeks, Robert became a regular presence in Elena's life. He stopped by almost every day, sometimes to check on the progress of his ordered blankets, but more often just to talk. He brought her lunch from the bakery, helped her carry water from the well, and sat for hours watching her work at the loom, asking questions about her techniques and the meanings behind different patterns. Elena found herself looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that both thrilled and frightened her. She had been alone for so long, focused entirely on survival, that she had forgotten what it felt like to connect with someone. But Robert made it easy. He was kind and funny and genuinely interested in everything she had to say. He told her stories about his adventures on various cattle drives, describing landscapes she had never seen and situations that made her laugh until her sides hurt. One afternoon, as she was finishing the last of his ordered blankets, Robert arrived with a serious expression on his face. "I have been thinking a lot about what we discussed," he said without preamble, "about your business and how to make it more successful. I have a proposal for you if you are willing to hear it." Elena set down her shuttle, her stomach fluttering with nerves. "I am listening." "There is a property on Main Street, right in the center of town. It has been empty for 6 months since the previous tenant left. It is a good size, with big windows and enough space for your loom and a proper display area. I spoke with the owner yesterday. I can lease it for a reasonable price." "Robert, I already told you I cannot afford that. I know, but I can. Hear me out." He moved closer, his expression earnest. I want to invest in your business. I will pay for the lease, for a proper sign, for advertising in the newspaper. In return, I would like to be your business partner. We split the profits equally after expenses. You keep complete creative control over your work, but we work together on the business side of things. Elena stared at him, her mind racing. Why would you do this? Because your work deserves to be seen. Because I believe in what you do. And because, if I am being completely honest, I want a reason to stay in Rawlins. He paused, holding her gaze. I want a reason to stay near you, her breath caught. Robert, I know we have only known each other a short time, but I have not felt this way about anyone before. You are talented and strong and beautiful, and when I am with you, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. I am not asking for anything beyond partnership right now. I just want the chance to keep getting to know you to see where this could go. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. For 3 years she had struggled alone, watching her dreams slowly die as rejection piled upon rejection. And now here was this man, this unexpected cowboy, offering not just financial help but belief in her, faith that what she created mattered. What if it does not work? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if people still do not buy my blankets? Then we will figure something else out. But I do not think that will happen. I think once people really see your work, they will recognize how special it is. Elena closed her eyes, thinking of her mother and grandmother, of all the women who had passed down this craft through generations. They had never had an opportunity like this. They had woven in obscurity, their art appreciated only within their own families and communities. This was a chance to honor their legacy, to show the world what their techniques could create. All right, she said, opening her eyes. Let us try. Robert's face broke into a wide smile. Really, really. But I have one condition. I will take your investment, but only as a loan. I will pay you back everything you spend on this with interest. We can be partners in the work, but I do not want charity. That is not what I am offering. I know, but it is important to me. Robert considered this, then nodded. All right. We will draw up a proper contract, make everything legal and clear. But Elena, I want you to know that I believe this will be successful. I think you are going to pay me back within a year, and after that, we are going to both be making good money. They shook hands on it, and then Robert pulled her into a hug that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Elena let herself relax into his arms, breathing in the scent of leather and soap and something uniquely him. When they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Robert leased the property on Main Street and immediately set to work preparing it. He cleaned the space thoroughly, whitewashed the walls, and built display racks designed specifically for hanging blankets. Elena helped when she could, but she was busy finishing several new pieces to stock their shop. Robert commissioned a sign from the local carpenter, a beautiful painted board that read Martinez Weavings in elegant script. On the day they opened, Elena stood outside the shop at dawn, staring up at her name on the sign. She was terrified and excited in equal measure. Robert came up beside her, 2 cups of coffee in his hands. Ready? He asked, handing her a cup. I think so. What if nobody comes? Then we will figure out how to make them come. But I think you are worrying for nothing. He was right. Within an hour of opening, they had their first customers, a wealthy couple from back east who were traveling through Wyoming and stopped to admire the blankets displayed in the windows. They spent nearly an hour in the shop, asking questions about Elena's techniques and the meanings behind different patterns. They left with 2 blankets and promises to tell their friends back in Boston about the remarkable weaver they had discovered in Rawlins. More customers followed throughout the day. Some were just curious, drawn in by the beautiful displays. Others were serious buyers, ranchers' wives looking for quality blankets to warm their homes, and businessmen seeking unique gifts for family members. By the time they closed that first evening, Elena had sold 4 blankets and taken orders for 3 more. "I told you," Robert said, grinning as he counted the day's receipts. "People just needed to see your work." Elena was exhausted but happier than she had been in years. "I could not have done this without you. We did it together. That is what partners do." Over the following months, the shop became increasingly successful. Word spread about the quality of Elena's work, and people started coming from other towns specifically to buy her blankets. She hired a young woman named Mary to help with sales so she could focus on weaving. And Robert proved to have a natural head for business, keeping careful records and finding new ways to promote Elena's work. But more than the business success, Elena found herself falling for Robert. It happened gradually, in small moments. The way he brought her tea when she had been weaving for hours and forgot to take breaks. How he listened so intently when she talked about her family and her heritage, asking thoughtful questions and remembering every detail. The gentle way he touched her hand when they walked together in the evenings, after the shop closed and they strolled through Rawlins as the sun set over the distant mountains. One evening in early October, they were working late at the shop. Elena was finishing a complex pattern while Robert organized the back room. The lamps cast a warm glow, and outside the windows, the first hints of autumn were coloring the leaves of the few trees that grew along Main Street. "Elena," Robert said, emerging from the back room. "Can you take a break for a minute?" She looked up from her loom, noting the unusual nervousness in his voice. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I just need to talk to you about something." Elena stood, stretching her stiff back. Robert took her hands in his, and she could feel them trembling slightly. "We have been working together for almost 5 months now," he said. "And in that time, this has become more than just a business partnership for me. I think you know that." "I know," Elena said softly. "It has become more for me too." "I love you," Robert said, the words coming out in a rush. "I have loved you for a while now, but I wanted to wait until the business was stable, until I could prove to you that I was serious about all of this. But I cannot wait anymore to tell you how I feel." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. "I love you too. I have been afraid to say it, afraid that maybe this was all too good to be true." Robert pulled her close, and when he kissed her, Elena felt like all the broken pieces of her life were finally coming together. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, but it deepened as they both gave in to feelings they had been holding back for months. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Marry me," Robert said. "I know this might seem too fast, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to help you grow your business and make beautiful things together." "Yes," Elena said, laughing through her tears. "Yes, I will marry you." Robert picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her again, and Elena felt a joy so complete it almost frightened her. After so many years of struggle and loneliness, she had found not just success but love, and it felt like a miracle. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small Catholic church in Rawlins. Elena wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Robert had insisted on buying for her, and she carried wildflowers that he had picked himself that morning. They had no family present, but several of their customers came, along with Mary and a handful of other friends they had made in town. The priest spoke in English and Spanish, blessing their union in both languages, and when Robert kissed his bride, everyone cheered. The reception was held at the shop, which they had decorated with some of Elena's most beautiful blankets. Someone brought a fiddle, and another person produced a guitar, and soon there was music and dancing. Elena danced with her husband, letting him spin her across the floor while their friends clapped and stomped their feet. "Happy?" Robert asked, pulling her close. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good, because this is just the beginning." They spent their wedding night in the small house Robert had rented on the edge of Rawlins, a modest place but clean and comfortable. Robert carried Elena over the threshold, making her laugh, and then set her down gently in the main room. "I have something for you," he said, moving to the bedroom and returning with a carefully wrapped package. Elena opened it to find a blanket, but not one she had made. This one was older, the colors faded but the weaving still sturdy. The pattern was distinctly Irish, interlocking chains and crosses worked in wool. "This was my grandmother's," Robert explained. "She brought it from Ireland when she emigrated. My mother gave it to me before I left Texas, told me to save it for when I found the woman I wanted to spend my life with. I want you to have it." Elena ran her fingers over the weaving, feeling the history in every thread. "Robert, this is precious. Are you sure?" "I am sure. Our families are joined now. Your traditions and mine, woven together just like the patterns you create." They made love that night with a tenderness that took Elena's breath away. Robert was gentle and patient, and when they finally came together, Elena felt completely safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Afterward, they lay tangled together under his grandmother's blanket, talking quietly until they fell asleep in each other's arms. The first year of their marriage was filled with both challenges and triumphs. The shop continued to thrive, and Elena's reputation grew beyond Wyoming. She received orders from customers in Colorado, Nebraska, and even as far as California. Robert proved to be not just a loving husband but a true partner in every sense, handling the business aspects of the shop while Elena focused on her craft. In the spring of 1879, Elena realized she was pregnant. She told Robert on a Sunday morning as they lay in bed, the sunlight streaming through their bedroom window. "Are you certain?" he asked, his hand immediately moving to her still flat stomach. "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. But yes, I am certain." Robert's face broke into a smile so bright it made her heart ache. "We are going to have a baby." "We are." He kissed her then, long and deep, and Elena felt overwhelmed by love for this man who had changed her entire life. When they finally got out of bed, Robert insisted on making breakfast while Elena rested, even though she felt perfectly fine. It set a pattern that would continue throughout her pregnancy. Robert became almost comically overprotective, worrying whenever she worked too long at the loom or lifted anything heavier than a teacup. "I am growing a baby, not dying of consumption," Elena finally said one day in exasperation. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "I know. But none of those women were my wife carrying my child." Elena could not argue with that logic, though she continued to work at her loom almost up until her due date. She found that weaving calmed her mind and helped her process the enormous changes happening to her body and her life. She created a special blanket for the baby, using the softest wool she could find and dyeing it in gentle shades of cream and pale blue and soft pink, not knowing yet whether they would have a son or a daughter. In December, as the first real snow began to fall over Rawlins, Elena went into labor. Robert fetched the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson who had delivered most of the babies in town. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Elena thought she might not survive it. But Robert stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand and whispering encouragement, and finally, just as dawn was breaking, their son was born. "He is perfect," Robert said, tears streaming down his face as he held the tiny, squalling infant. He is absolutely perfect." They named him Thomas, after Robert's grandfather. Elena spent the first weeks after his birth in a haze of exhaustion and overwhelming love. Thomas was a hungry baby who rarely slept for more than 2 hours at a stretch, and there were moments when Elena wondered if she would ever feel like herself again. But Robert was endlessly patient, taking the baby whenever Elena needed to rest, walking the floor with Thomas in the middle of the night, and somehow managing to keep the shop running smoothly even with a newborn at home. "You are a natural father," Elena told him one night as she watched him change Thomas's diaper with practiced efficiency. "I am learning, same as you. But you are so calm about everything. I feel like I am constantly panicking." Robert looked up at her, his expression serious. "Do you want to know a secret? I am terrified every single day. Terrified I am going to do something wrong and hurt him, or that something bad will happen that I cannot prevent. But then I look at you, at how strong you are, and I figure if you can do this, I can too." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes as they did so easily since Thomas's birth. "I love you so much. I love you too, both of you." As Thomas grew from an infant into a toddler, the shop continued to prosper. Elena hired another assistant and eventually taught both young women basic weaving techniques so they could help with simpler projects. She focused on creating more complex pieces, blankets that took weeks or even months to complete, but sold for impressive prices to wealthy collectors. Robert expanded the business in other directions, finding other local artisans whose work complemented Elena's and arranging to sell their goods in the shop. They added pottery from a talented widow who lived outside town, carved wooden items from a German immigrant with incredible skill, and beadwork from a Shoshone woman who became one of Elena's closest friends. The shop became known as a place to find beautiful, handcrafted items, and people came from increasingly far distances to visit. Robert and Elena plowed their profits back into the business and into their community, hiring local workers whenever possible and donating to the church and school. When Thomas was 3 years old, Elena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Their daughter, Catherine, was born on a warm June evening, entering the world with a lusty cry that made everyone in the room laugh. She had Elena's dark hair and Robert's blue eyes, and from the beginning, her personality was different from her brother's. Where Thomas had been a fussy baby, Catherine was calm and content, sleeping through the night from just a few weeks old and smiling at everyone who looked at her. "Two children," Robert said one night as they stood over the cradle watching Catherine sleep. "Sometimes I can hardly believe this is my life." "Our life," Elena corrected, leaning against him. "Our life," he agreed, wrapping his arm around her waist. "Do you ever think about where we would be if I had not walked into your old workshop that day?" "Sometimes. I would probably still be weaving blankets nobody bought, slowly starving and too stubborn to admit I needed to try something different. And I would probably still be drifting from job to job, never settling anywhere, never finding anything worth staying for." He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "You gave me a purpose, Elena, a reason to build something lasting instead of just existing day to day." "You gave me hope," Elena said, "when I had none left." They kissed softly, mindful of the sleeping baby nearby. Even after years of marriage, Elena still felt a thrill every time Robert touched her. The passion between them had not faded but had instead deepened, becoming something richer and more complex than simple attraction. As their children grew, Elena taught them about weaving and about their heritage. Thomas showed some interest, but preferred working with his father on the business side of things, learning to keep books and manage inventory. Catherine, however, was fascinated by the loom from a very young age. By the time she was 5, she was sitting beside Elena and learning basic techniques, her small fingers carefully manipulating threads under her mother's patient guidance. "She has the gift," Elena's friend Sarah, the Shoshone beadworker, observed one day. "You can see it in how she understands the patterns." Elena watched her daughter work, seeing her own childhood reflected in Catherine's intense concentration. "I hope so. It would be good to know these traditions will continue." "They will. You have made sure of that." The years passed in a blur of work and family and quiet happiness. The shop became an established fixture in Rawlins, known throughout Wyoming and beyond. Elena's blankets were featured in newspapers and magazines, and she received commissions from people she never would have imagined reaching. A senator's wife in Washington ordered a blanket for the White House. A wealthy railroad baron requested a series of blankets depicting the history of the Transcontinental Railroad. Each project pushed Elena's skills further, and she continued to grow as an artist. Robert aged gracefully, his brown hair gradually turning silver at the temples. He had occasional aches from his years of hard ranch work, but he remained strong and vital. He never lost his enthusiasm for the business or for his family, greeting each new day with optimism and energy that sometimes exhausted Elena just to watch. "How do you do it?" she asked him one evening as they sat on the porch of their house, which they had expanded over the years into a comfortable home. "How do you stay so positive all the time?" "Because I have everything I ever wanted," Robert said simply. "A woman I love, healthy children, meaningful work. Why would I be anything but happy? Some people always want more. Then those people are fools. I learned a long time ago that enough is enough, and I have more than enough." Elena reached over and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. After all these years, his touch still made her feel safe and loved. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over Rawlins, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. When Thomas turned 18, he surprised them both by announcing he wanted to attend university in Denver. "I want to learn about business properly," he explained. "Everything Father has taught me is valuable, but I want to learn more, to bring new ideas back to help grow what we have built." Elena's first instinct was to protest, to keep her son close, but Robert squeezed her hand under the table and she bit back her words. "If that is what you want, then you should go," Robert said. "We will support you." Thomas left in the fall of 1894, and the house felt unbearably empty without him. But he wrote often, long letters describing his classes and the city and his dreams for the future. He came home for holidays, each time a little more grown up, a little more confident in himself. Catherine, meanwhile, had become a skilled weaver in her own right. At 16, she could create patterns as complex as anything Elena made, though her style was slightly different, incorporating more modern sensibilities while still honoring traditional techniques. They worked side by side at the shop, 2 generations of weavers creating art together. "I have been thinking," Elena said to Robert one night after Catherine had gone to bed. "I am getting older. My eyes are not what they used to be, and my hands ache more than they once did. Maybe it is time to start thinking about stepping back, letting Catherine take over more of the weaving work." Robert looked at her with concern. "Are you all right? Are you in pain?" "I am fine. Just realistic. I am 42 years old, Robert. I have been weaving since I was a child. It has been a good life, but I am tired." "Then rest. We have more than enough money. You do not have to work every day anymore." "I know, but the shop has always been my identity. I do not know who I am without it." Robert pulled her into his arms, and Elena rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "You are Elena Sullivan," You are my wife, mother to our children, an artist who has shared her gift with the world. The shop is part of your legacy, but it is not all of who you are. When did you become so wise? I married a wise woman. Some of it must have rubbed off. They decided together that Elena would gradually reduce her hours at the shop, taking on only special commissions that truly interested her, and spending more time teaching Catherine and the other young weavers they had trained over the years. It was harder than Elena expected, learning to let go of something that had defined so much of her life. But it was also freeing. She started spending more time with other pursuits. She and Sarah worked together on a book documenting traditional Apache and Shoshone weaving and beadwork techniques, collaborating with a publisher in Denver who was interested in preserving indigenous arts. She took long walks through the countryside around Rawlins, gathering plants for dyes and simply enjoying the landscape she had called home for so many years. Robert remained as busy as ever, but he made sure they had time together. They took trips to visit Thomas in Denver, marveling at how quickly the city was growing. They traveled to the Wind River Range and spent a week camping under the stars, something they had not done since before the children were born. They went to San Francisco and saw the ocean for the first time, standing hand in hand on the beach and watching the waves roll in. I never imagined I would see something like this, Elena said, her voice filled with wonder. There is still so much to see, Robert replied. So much to experience together. On their 20th anniversary, Robert surprised Elena by taking her back to her old workshop at the edge of Rawlins. The building was still standing, though it was now used as a storage shed by whoever owned the property. They stood outside, looking at the familiar adobe walls. You remember the first time I walked through that door? Robert asked. I thought you were lost, or possibly insane for wanting to buy so many blankets. I knew from the moment I saw your work that I had found something special. I just did not realize how special until I got to know you. You changed my life that day. We changed each other's lives. Robert turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. I have loved every minute of the past 20 years. Every triumph and every challenge, every ordinary day and every special moment. You are the best decision I ever made. Elena felt tears streaming down her face. I love you so much, more now than even when we first married. That is because we have built a life together. We have created something real and lasting. They kissed there outside her old workshop, two middle-aged people who still felt like young lovers when they were in each other's arms. When they finally pulled apart, Elena looked up at the building one last time. I was so scared back then, she said. So convinced that I was going to fail. But you did not fail. You succeeded beyond what anyone could have imagined. We succeeded, together. Thomas graduated from university and returned to Rawlins with his degree and a young woman he introduced as his fiancée. Julia was smart and kind, the daughter of a Denver merchant, and she fit into their family as if she had always belonged. They were married in the same church where Robert and Elena had exchanged vows, and the following year they gave Robert and Elena their first grandchild, a boy they named Robert after his grandfather. Holding his namesake for the first time, Robert cried openly, not caring who saw. I never thought I would live to see this day, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Elena watched her husband with their grandson and felt her heart might burst from joy. They had built something that would outlast them, a family and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Catherine eventually married as well, a quiet young man named Peter who worked as a teacher at the Rawlins School. They had 3 daughters in quick succession, and Catherine taught all of them to weave, continuing the tradition that stretched back through generations of women in Elena's family. As Elena entered her 50s, she finally stopped weaving entirely, her hands too stiff with arthritis to manage the delicate work. It was difficult to let go completely, but she found satisfaction in watching Catherine and her granddaughters work at the looms, knowing that the art she loved would not die with her. The shop had long since paid back Robert's initial investment many times over. It remained successful under Catherine and Thomas's joint management, and they expanded it further, opening a second location in Cheyenne that also thrived. The Sullivan family became well known throughout Wyoming, respected for their business acumen and their commitment to supporting local artisans and preserving traditional crafts. Robert retired from the day-to-day operations of the business when he turned 60, finally ready to slow down and enjoy the fruits of their long labor. He and Elena spent their days quietly, tending a garden at their house, playing with their growing number of grandchildren, and simply being together. "You have any regrets?" Elena asked him one evening as they sat on their porch, a familiar ritual after so many years. Robert was quiet for a long moment, considering. "No, not a single one. There are things I might have done differently if I knew then what I know now, but I do not regret any of it. Everything we did, every choice we made led us here. And here is exactly where I want to be. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. They made us stronger." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him beside her. They had weathered so much together. The early struggles to establish the business, the fears and challenges of parenthood, the inevitable losses as friends and loved ones passed away. Through it all, they had remained united, facing every obstacle as partners. As the years continued to pass, they grew old together gracefully. Robert's hair turned completely white, and Elena's face gained lines that mapped out decades of laughter and hard work. They moved more slowly, tired more easily, but the love between them remained as strong as ever. On a cool evening in October of 1910, they celebrated their 32nd anniversary with a party their children threw for them. The whole family gathered at Thomas's house, which was large enough to accommodate everyone. There were grandchildren running everywhere, and even 2 great-grandchildren, babies born to Thomas's eldest daughter. Elena looked around at the faces of her family, at the life she and Robert had created together, and felt overwhelming gratitude. She thought about that young woman sitting alone at her loom in a failing workshop, creating beauty that no one seemed to want. That woman could never have imagined this future, surrounded by love and success, and the knowledge that she had made a difference in the world. "What are you thinking about?" Robert asked, appearing at her elbow with a glass of wine. "Just how far we have come. We have come pretty far, have we not? Further than I ever dreamed possible." She took the wine and raised her glass. "To us." "To us," Robert echoed, clinking his glass against hers. "And to the many more years we still have ahead." They drank together, and then Robert pulled her close for a kiss that made their grandchildren giggle and their children smile fondly. Even after all these years, Robert could still make Elena's heart flutter with a single touch. As the party continued around them, Elena found herself thinking about her mother and grandmother, about all the women who had come before her and passed down the art of weaving through generations. She hoped they could see what she had accomplished, how she had taken their teachings and built something lasting. She had preserved their traditions while also growing beyond them, creating a bridge between old and new, between heritage and innovation. "Thank you," she whispered to Robert. "For what?" "For walking through my door that day, for seeing value in what I created when no one else did, for believing in me." Robert cupped her face gently in his weathered hands. "You had the talent and the determination. All I did was help give you a platform. The rest was all you." "No. It was us. It was always us. They stood together in the middle of the party, two old people who had loved each other through decades of life's joys and sorrows, and Elena knew with absolute certainty that she would not change a single thing about the path that had brought them here. The Martinez weaving shop continued to thrive for many more years, eventually becoming a landmark in Rawlins. When Elena passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, surrounded by her family, the town mourned the loss of one of its most beloved citizens. Robert followed her just 9 months later, unable to imagine life without the woman who had been his partner in every way that mattered. They were buried side by side in the Rawlins cemetery, under a shared headstone that read simply, Robert and Elena Sullivan, partners in life and love. Their grandchildren carried on the business they had built, and their great-grandchildren learned to weave using the same techniques Elena had learned from her grandmother. The blankets Elena had created were treasured as family heirlooms, passed down through generations. Some ended up in museums, recognized as important examples of indigenous art forms preserved and elevated through Elena's unique vision. The book she had written with Sarah became a standard reference for anyone studying traditional weaving techniques. But perhaps Elena's greatest legacy was the example she set, proving that with talent, determination, and the support of someone who truly believes in you, it is possible to overcome any obstacle. She had taken ancient traditions and found a way to make them relevant in a changing world. She had built a successful business in an era when women rarely had such opportunities. And she had done it all while remaining true to herself and to the heritage that had shaped her. The story of the weaver and the cowboy became something of a legend in Rawlins, told and retold with various embellishments over the years. But at its heart, it remained a simple and beautiful truth. Sometimes love and success come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes all it takes is one person who sees your worth to change your entire life. The shop that Robert had helped Elena establish remained in the family for 3 generations, and in the window, they kept one of the first blankets she had ever made, a testament to where it all began. It hung there through changing seasons and passing years, a reminder that beautiful things have value even when the world does not immediately recognize it, and that sometimes the greatest gift one person can give another is simply to see them, truly see them, and believe in what they can become. And so the legacy of Elena Martinez and Robert Sullivan lived on, woven into the very fabric of Rawlins, Wyoming. A love story as enduring and beautiful as the blankets that had brought them together in the first place.